You are listening to The Underground Subway with host David Alston, a podcast dedicated to giving you the strategies to live a free and better life. Here is David Alston.
Hi, I'm David Alston, and welcome to the Underground Subway. Thank you for joining this podcast in which we are dedicated to making life better, offering you the strategies, the plans, the ideas, our experiences to make life better for you. The great Harriet Tubman, she led the Underground Railroad many years ago. My grandmother was first cousins with Harriet, and although cousin Harriet, she ran the Underground Railroad. Well, we're in 2022, and because we're in 2022, we don't do the railroad. We modernized it, the Underground Subway. The problem is that cousin Harriet said one time that I could have freed so many more slaves if only they knew that they were slaves. So many people were living, functioning, operating in a system in which they didn't know that they were free. They didn't know that they were not free. Harriet said, if only I could have shared with them that there's a better life, I could have offered them a plan and a way of escape. My friends, so many of us are living a life in which we think we are free. We think we are experiencing our best life, but we're here to explain to you and show you that there's always a better way. We can all improve. We can all be better. And so the Underground Subway is dedicated to doing just that, a podcast that will offer you everything you need to break the chains that have been holding you back, to live a free life. What is freedom? It is the ability to think, to function, to act, to speak, to move in many areas of life without restraints. Well, as I always come back to you on this podcast, sometimes I talk to you myself, but I enjoy so much bringing special guests on with me, guests that are experts in the area of offering you what you need to do in order to be free. And my guest for this particular podcast is Leslie Hardy. Leslie is a wonderful woman that has offered so many tools and strategies to the world to help them become better. And she has so graciously volunteered to come and join the Underground Subway. Thank you, my friend, for joining us. And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you, Mr. David, for having me on. It is truly my privilege and honor to be here today. Just a little bit about myself. One of the things I like to lead with is I am a fun-loving mother, woman of God. I help serve people in the space of mental health as a licensed psychotherapist and also now a clinically informed relationship and life strategist. And so I enjoy being able to do what I can do to help people learn how to love themselves better, first of all, but also equip them to show up better in their respective relationships. So that's a little bit about me. I do want to add too, I love the ocean. So I always like to try to get away and have a little ocean therapy is what I call it.
All right. Welcome to the club.
All right.
I'm already planning. I sometimes I'll go. Some people plan a little ocean therapy for days and weeks at a time. I will plan one for 45 minutes. I'll just drive to the beach and just walk along for 45 minutes and drive on back.
Man, I'm telling you, if I live that close, I would do the same thing.
Yes. All right. Well, let's get into this conversation. A few weeks ago, you had a workshop, a virtual workshop, in which I had the privilege of hopping on, and it was titled "Mastering Me in We." And I want to give you an opportunity to explain what that workshop entailed. But before you do, I will put in a disclaimer. During the workshop, I actually stopped and asked myself a question. I said, wow, do I really love me?
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to love others. It's easy to say, I love you. Some people have a hard time saying that to others, but I asked myself, do I love me? And so tell us, what was that workshop about? And then let's talk about some of the things you guys discussed.
Okay, sure. Yeah, Mastering Me in We. It was a virtual summit where we talked about how are we showing up in love and how are we showing up in relationships. And foundationally, the most important relationship that we'll ever be in is the relationship with ourselves, because we cannot live without us, right? And
Right.
so we really talked about the importance of having a good, healthy self image, a good, healthy sense of self, even being knowing and being true to your own identity, so that you can really walk in your own self worth and command the type of relationships that you want. You know, one of the things I say often is we can attract any and everything, any and everybody. The anointing itself attracts, but it's who we choose that really is the indicator about how we feel about ourselves. And so, how we love ourselves is an indicator or reflection, if you will, of how well equipped we are to love other people.
Hmm. What would you say, um, if we talk about loving ourselves? I guess the opposite, the opposite of saying that I love myself would be to say that I really dislike or hate myself. What do you think it is about us that we dislike the most about ourselves?
You know what? I think that when people have that thought, and if they even say that, I think it's because they don't really know who they are, and they don't really know the essence of their worth and their value. And we talked about this at the summit. One of the foundational things with that is, you know, when we are born into our respective families, that is the first place that we learn what love is. It's through the
Hmm.
relationships we have in those formative years. And so, depending on what our experiences were in those formative years, it'll have it's a gateway, if you will, to how we experience every other relationship thereafter in our, adolescence and our young adult years and on into adulthood. And so, when people have the thoughts or they say they don't love themselves, and basically what they're saying is, I don't really know myself well. Because when we get to know who we are, and we can learn how to appreciate that. I think one of the things that happens in this society is that, especially with social media, I think it's been heightened. I don't think I know it's been heightened since the age of social media, but there is such a spirit of comparison that is
Right.
going around.
Right.
And so when people get into this space where they start looking at who they are, who they perceive themselves to be, and they compare that to what they see out here, mainly on social media, because if we were to really look at the people in our interconnected circle, people that we can reach out and touch every day, most of them look a lot like us, because we
Mhm.
tend to, be with people who we are in proximity to, and those people that we like and show up like us. But it's when we start beginning to look at those people that we think are somehow further ahead, or they're different, or they're better somehow, not realizing that a lot of what we see is not even real or true. And even if it is that person's highlight reel. They're not showing you their day to day challenges that all people go through. And
Mhm.
so anytime someone is saying that, they don't like themselves or they hate themselves, it's really about they haven't learned how to love them because they haven't discovered who they are.
What do you think about this statement? If What do you think about this comment if I were to say to someone, forget what you look like?
Mhm.
I mean, it's
Forget what.
just forget what you look like. And the reason I said that is because if we're going to say that I don't like myself or what have you, comparison, do you agree that most people, if you ask them, what is it about yourself that you dislike the most? Don't you think most people would say it's the way I look? So if I say to someone, forget what you look like, because what you look like isn't the real you.
Mhm.
I mean, do
Absolutely.
you agree with that or?
Yeah, I do, because we're visual people.
Mhm.
And the first thing that, if the first impression we have of someone is what we see. And so, I don't know about you, but growing up, my parents used to always say, make sure you look a certain way when you're leaving the house, because you only get one chance to make a first impression, right? And
Right.
so people are hypersensitive, I think, to the outward appearance of how they look, so much so that, people get caught up on name brand clothing,
Right.
because they think it denotes some type of social status and whatnot. And so that's really a mindset. That's really
Mm-hmm.
a mind. But absolutely, people do tend to focus on how they look. And a lot of people spend a lot of time, effort, and money into looking a certain way.
Right. uh, Leslie, I one of the things on my podcast that I ask all of my guests, well, most of them, I bring up this same analogy, and so most of them laugh and say, "You got me." So I'm going to get you. I I was born and raised in Philadelphia, and one of my favorite movies outside of Jaws and John Wick and all of those action movies, one of my favorite movies is actually called Philadelphia, starring Denzel Washington and Tom Hanks. And Denzel Washington is an attorney, and he asks a witness on the stand. He asks the gentleman a question. He says, "Now explain it to me like I'm a 6-year-old." And so I want to ask you a question, and I want you to explain it to me like I'm a 6-year-old. How do I begin to love me? How do I begin to love me, fall in love with me?
Well, I would say that now this is what I would say. We were all created by one God who took the time to make us special, and
Mhm,
everybody's special in their own little way.
mhm,
And so there's no two people that are just alike. And so when we take the time to look at the different things about us that's different than Johnny or Susan or the next person, it doesn't mean that it takes away from us. It means
mhm,
that everybody's just that special, that you have something unique that no one else has.
mhm.
And
Wow.
I begin to focus on, well, let's look at what makes you unique.
Mhm. Right. That's true. That's true. Because you look at a person's picture and they have two eyes, a nose, and a mouth. Well, so do you, but theirs is
Mhm,
uniquely different than yours. Let's.
mhm.
What did your conference, your virtual conference, what did it deal with in regard to the other side of the coin? Not just falling in love with me, but what did it talk about or deal with in regard to relationships?
Yeah, we talked about solutions to relationships that may break up, that may not be going well. What do you do? How do you come through that and come through that well and come through that the best way that you can? One thing I believe is that no time is wasted. You either learn or you actually have a lesson from it. And so when we have that perspective about life in general, honestly, but one of the things that we talked about was that relationships are the context in which we get to see ourselves, but it's also the context in which we get to have a healing corrective experience. And so in the virtual summit, what we did, we talked about, well, how do you go from, okay, let's assume you do love yourself well enough that you can be in a healthy relationship. What are some ways that you can transition if things do end up going south and the relationship do end up dissolving? And so talking about how do you take care of yourself, self-care, how do you take care of yourself so that you can get yourself back to a place where you are willing to engage a relationship again, because some people come out of relationships so hurt and damaged that they stay closed off. In fact, we had a Q&A session where a gentleman actually asked that question about, well, how do you balance working on yourself and making sure you're well enough to engage a relationship and actually engaging in the relationship so that you're not just paralyzed in fear and you never really get back out there. And we really, and we're created for relationships. We exist in relationships in one form or another. And
Mhm,
so that's really the only way you have a chance to see how well you're doing is to be in relationship with someone, whether that's an intimate partner relationship, your family relationship, your coworker relationship, your friendships, whatever it may be. And so we just kind of walk through that process of, loving yourself, transitioning to being in relationships that may not work out. What do you do in the process after the breakup? Healing yourself back to another place to be engaged again. And so, some of the speakers really talked about the steps to wound your heart,
Mhm.
wounding you. And so we really kind of managed, some of the questions and fielded some of the questions in that way and gave some great solutions and strategies for people to be able to do that.
Do you think that because of the emotional scale tilted on one side or the other, do you think that because women are their emotions are a little stronger than men, do you think that our sisters really struggle with making that transition from broken relationships? Because you see them, they're hurt, they're wounded. What are your views on women becoming stronger and falling in love with themselves before they can fall in love with someone else?
Well, I want to say this. I do believe that men feel just as strongly as women. It's just that women are more expressive, outwardly expressive, I think, of their emotions. And so, because of that, I think women are perceived as responding a certain way, whereas men tend to go inward. So, a
Right.
man can be just as hurt, from a breakup in a relationship, but he may
Mhm.
not express it or verbalize it as much.
Exactly.
Um, Women, we are conditioned to be more verbal. Where society lets us know that it's okay for us to express our emotions in a certain way. And so, because of that, I think a lot of women are fine. They're free to do that. I don't think it's always done in the most healthy way, but we are definitely freer to do that. And what was the
Mhm.
other part of your question?
Oh, I was just wondering, what do they need to do? But I agree with you, and I tend to think that a man, because he doesn't verbalize it, he will cover it up by jumping on to the next person.
Yep, that oftentimes happens.
Yeah,
Yep.
a lot of times he'll just jump on to the next person and do that. So what do we need to do? Is there any ideas or strong points or strategies that we need to do to continue to work on to build strong relationships of any kind? It doesn't, because, well, scratch that question because I have another question. So scratch that one. We'll scratch that question. I was talking to someone the other day, and the question came up about friendships, which is a relationship. Uh,
Mhm.
and the question came up: can you be in a friendship that does not lead or doesn't have the goal of marriage?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. In fact, I would say most of them probably would. But that's interesting though, because we talked about that a little bit during the summit. And so when I think about the spectrum, if you will, the continuum of relationships, and we start with friendship over here, um, once people are in friendship, they have mutual interests, mutual goals and values and beliefs, and they enjoy spending time with each other. They're compatible in certain ways. And again, this is just platonic. It doesn't mean that there's any intimate interest, if you will. But if they should develop toward maybe wanting to explore a more intimate relationship, romantic relationship, I think that is a progressive process. And I do think that people need to be very intentional about that. And
Mhm.
so that requires effective communication. People need to be really clear about what their needs are, what their wants are, what their expectations are, and where their boundaries are in their friendships so that the other party is not misled or drug along into something that they're not sure they're even in.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. I agree. How important is it? How important is the past? How important does past relationships? What factor does that play in relationships going forward?
Oh, it definitely plays a factor. In fact, one of the things I say often is that every experience that you've had, every relationship that you've had, it either influences and well, not either, it influences, informs, and it impacts your next relationship, your next experience. And so if we have had a bad breakup, or not even a breakup, if we've had relationships that we feel or experience as harmful, it's important that we take the time to understand why that impacted us the way it did and to heal from that. Otherwise, just unconsciously, we'll go about looking for ways to either avoid that or looking for other people to kind of soothe that for us instead of our learning to do that. And we can
Hmm.
end up in situations where we end up choosing people who are not good for us because we're not well, we're not healed.
Hmm. And, and what happens when we're not healed?
We end up continuing to what I call self sabotage, because you can't change what you don't acknowledge. You can't change what you're not aware of. And so we have to first acknowledge that, hey, I'm not okay in this area. I'm really hurt. Um, there's something I need here. And people may need help even identifying what that is, and that's okay. But identifying where the wounds are and being able to create a solution for that, being able to walk through the place and strategically, intentionally do the work so that you're no longer wounded in that area. And so one of the speakers at the summit talked about, she applied the physical wound care concept to the emotional concept, to the emotion, if you will. And she
Hmm.
kind of walked through that. And one of the things she talked about was, one of the things we have to do is identify it, and then you have to be able to forgive. You have to be able to forgive because sometimes people are wounded or hurt in relationships, and the other party doesn't even know. The
Wow.
party that may have created the offense doesn't even know that happened. And that's why
Hmm.
communication is so important. And so if we are willing and in a place where we have the ability to say to the people that hurt us, hey, you did this and I was hurt. And part of that communication, David, is just learning how to have the language to communicate where it doesn't put people on the defense. And I think a lot of people have a breakdown in communication because, we learn often and early that we blame other people in the way we talk. When we say, you made me this or you did
Right,
that,
right, right, right.
versus acknowledging the behavior and owning our own feelings.
Hmm.
If that
It does, and I hope I'm not opening a can of worms for people that are for the podcast listeners, but I'll just open it up because what you said was so true. And then, if we're not careful, what about breakups when you have children involved?
Oh wow. Yeah, that's probably one of the most important and sometimes the saddest of relationships when when the adults involved are not able to resolve their own differences and communicate in a way where the children can still feel good about both parents.
Hmm.
And I really think that should be the aim of co-parenting, is to love your child so well that you're willing to forgive their mother or their father for whatever.
Hmm.
Because one of the things I think parents lose sight of is that child is still a part of the other person. And it may be a person that you decided to end a relationship with, but the child doesn't get that option. And so they still have to be in relationship. And that other person is genetically a part of the child. And so
Hmm.
to do anything to damage that relationship also damages the child's identity and
But
how they feel about themselves.
we think that by um, damaging that relationship, it gets the child on my side so that it's us against you. And we don't realize that we are damaging that the child is the victim. Am I right?
Absolutely. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And that's a very selfish and immature position. I'll just say it because it
Hmm.
is.
Yes.
It's so I would really encourage, anyone who may find themselves in that position to really seek some counseling or coaching or something to help
Mhm.
that, because this is how generational cycles of dysfunction continue. It's when one generation does not heal well enough not to pass on the trauma.
Right, right. What else have you been involved in this area in the past outside of the workshop?
Well, oh, that's a good question. I'm actually in the process right now of launching another aspect of my business, the coaching business, where I get to work with people who they may not necessarily need therapy, but they actually need more supports and additional supports because they're just looking to grow. They're looking to be better. They may be fine where they are, but they're looking to be even better. There is so much potential in each of us that typically goes untapped. You probably have heard the saying, the richest place is in the graveyard, because
Yes,
people
yes.
really do not explore and walk into the fullness and the greatness of who they are. And so I'm really excited about expanding into that area where I get to work with the whole person. I get to work with people who are healthy enough that they want to just continue to get better and really grow to their full potential. And so doing that, in fact, I have a master class coming up next Saturday, where I'm going to be inviting people in to learn how to do just a little bit more of that,
Mhm.
working in that space. But I also like giving back and serving. So, I'm going to be participating in a community event coming up in a couple of weeks. I've served actually as a mental health consultant and therapist for a couple of film projects. And I'm really excited to share this. My cousin Talia Brian is actually the executive producer, director, writer of a project, a short film project called Grief. And it's going to be premiering here in the Raleigh, North Carolina area on next Saturday as well. And it has been the recipient of at least 5 awards. And, they're still getting invited to different film festivals and whatnot. But it is actually a tribute to her grandmother, which was my aunt, who died a year ago. So we are really excited about that. So, I have a few things going on. I'm really just looking to see all the different ways that I can just kind of tap in and serve and be available to people.
Can anyone access your any of your workshops or the workshop from today or previous workshops?
Yes. So the summit did, it will be on my actual website. And my website is my name, lesliemhardy.com. The summit can be found there. I did want to say too, the film project is going to be aired live as well, streamed live as well, depending on when this all airs as well. But yes, you can find and connect with me through my work, through my website. Also, oftentimes we'll have things on Facebook and Instagram, LinkedIn, soon to be YouTube. I actually have had, I do my own live stream show called Life Perspectives with Leslie. I started that back in 2019, and we've been on a little bit of a hiatus in 2022 just because of the other things that I'm working on for the business. But we will be coming back with live shows, bringing forth again information for the people, dropping nuggets and gems around all things life. I am in the mental health coaching space, but we really talk about like last year and the year before, there were a lot of things going on in the world, of course, the pandemic, but a lot of social justice issues that impacted everybody's mental health. So we did a whole series on that.
Mhm.
So yes, they can find me, my videos, through my website, through my Facebook, and also soon to be on YouTube.
All right. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us for this podcast. I know you had a busy day and doing so much, and um, I really appreciate the fact that you took time out of your hectic and busy schedule to squeeze little old me in for a few minutes. And we're going to do what we can to promote everything that you're doing.
Well, I certainly appreciate it. And again, it was truly a privilege to be here. Anytime I can invited and can serve and be on someone else's platform, it's always a privilege. I don't take it for granted. So thank you for having me on, David.
You're quite welcome. Well, my friends, I want to thank you for taking time to listen to this Power Pack podcast with Leslie M. Hardy. We gained so much information about learning how to love us and then expanding that love to love others. Um, it is, I mentioned the other day, I was watching a video and, the video was involving parents, soldiers, or men coming home to see their children unexpectedly. And it was
Mm.
just so powerful that my allergies started acting up. And I tell you that pollen really started working on my eyes. And I started, I really
Yeah.
started like, and you know, I made a comment when I posted it. I said that one of the most powerful gifts that God ever gave mankind was the gift of love. And so we have to love ourselves as we love others. And so we're so grateful for this podcast, grateful for our guest. I want to thank you for joining us for the Underground Subway. And listen, my friends, before we go, I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you before you go to bed tonight. Look yourself in the mirror. I want you to stare yourself right in your own eyes. And I want you to ask yourself a question. Today, did I do something to master me? Did I do something to work on loving me? Or did I waste another day? Think about that. We don't have time to waste anymore. I'll see you next time, right here on the Underground Subway.